Hey, what is up? So for this video, I actually wanted to take a look at the story of Mike Ehrmantraut. Specifically, as we head into season 6 of Better Call Saul, I wanted to look at why I find this story to be one of, if not the most tragic storylines from the plot of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And the reason why I find this story to be so tragic as we head into Better Call Saul next season is that no matter what exact plot transpires for Mike on screen, we already know what the ultimate plot of Mike will be in the end based on the backstory of Breaking Bad. And in my opinion, well, at the time of Mike's death in the plot of Breaking Bad, I really thought that this was a true tragic story and a true tragic ending to the character of Mike Ehrmantraut. Now, with the backstory of Mike's character that was cultivated and presented to us by the creators over the course of the plot of Better Call Saul, this now, in my opinion, makes what happened to Mike even sadder in the plot of Breaking Bad. Because as we should remember, it was presented to us in season 1 of Better Call Saul that Mike first came out to Albuquerque from Philadelphia following Mike avenging the death of his son at the hand of 2 crooked cops in Philadelphia. And it seems that Mike certainly chose to come to Albuquerque because this is where the wife of his son Stacy and his granddaughter Kaylee had moved following the death of Mike's son. And now, with this being the only remaining family that Mike has left in the plot of Better Call Saul, over the course of this series, we learned that Mike made it his life's goal that following the death of his son, he wanted to provide for his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter who were clearly struggling to make ends meet. This then led to Mike gradually taking odd jobs in the Albuquerque criminal underworld in order to help support Stacy and Kaylee. And over the course of 5 entire seasons of Better Call Saul, we saw Mike first take a job protecting none other than Daniel Wormold, which would then eventually lead to Mike meeting Nacho Varga, which would then, through a long, complex series of events, eventually lead Mike to working for none other than Gus Fring at the end of season 3 of Better Call Saul. And while Mike had a brief falling out with Gus Fring following the death of Werner Ziegler at the end of season 4 of Better Call Saul, we then eventually saw Mike really be persuaded by Gus Fring's speech to him in season 5 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Dedicado a Max, that feeling sorry for oneself and drowning one's emotional sorrows in alcohol and brawling with street hoods while being emotionally distant from one's family is no way to live one's life. And following this episode, we really see Mike now finally, seemingly, come to the point where he was when we first met him in the plot of Breaking Bad, as a button man, to use his own words, for Gus Fring. But despite all of this, and despite the fact that Mike will work this job for Gus Fring until Gus Fring's death in order to provide for his family, what makes this story of Mike so tragic is that in the end, all of this appeared to be for nothing. Because if we remember from the episode entitled Bagman in season 5 of Better Call Saul, Mike gave Saul a very impassioned speech regarding how he is able to keep going despite the enormous odds they were both dealing with while stranded in the middle of the desert.
I have people waiting for me. They don't know what I do. They never will. They're protected.
And while Mike reminds us that everything he does for his family to provide and to take care of them, and whether he lives or dies, it doesn't really matter to him as long as they are taken care of.
But I do what I do so they can have a better life. And if I live or if I die, it really doesn't make a difference to me as long as they have what they need. So when it's my time to go, I will go knowing I did everything I could for them. Now you ask me how I keep going. That's how.
Despite all of this, in the end, while Mike did die at the hands of Walter White, following him working for Gus Fring and then working for Walter White for a little bit, despite the fact that Mike died, as he said in his speech, it still appears that Mike was unable to provide for his family financially. Because as we all remember, Mike's money that he made with Gus Fring was first seized by the feds in the episode entitled Madrigal following Gus Fring's death. and then again in the episode entitled Say My Name, following Mike, realizing that due to the fact that his money had been taken by the feds for the first time, which he hoped to leave for his family, he then decided to partner with Walter White and Jesse in order to leave his family money. And on top of all of this, on top of Mike earning this money twice and then it being seized by the Fed twice, the coup de grace to all of this tragedy is that in the end, Mike's granddaughter, who Mike clearly loved unconditionally and wanted nothing more than to provide for her last memory of her grandfather Mike will be him leaving her in the park at 10 years old, following him have to flee once Walter White informs him that his lawyer Dan Wachsberger had flipped on him to the feds.
Yeah. Mike, they're coming for you. Right now, they're coming.
Slow down, Walter. Who?
The DEA. The DEA. Somebody flipped. They have some kind of bank surveillance and something about some lawyer. Someone is talking. Mike, and they're coming for you right now.
So now, in the end, after all of this, following what I would assume to be an extremely traumatic experience of Kaylee being left alone in the park at 10 years old, and then her mom eventually picking her up, wondering what happened to her grandfather, both of these characters at the end of the day are left to wonder what happened to Mike, who in the end would disappear without a trace, while we as the audience know that he was shot and killed by Walter White and then chemically disincorporated in a barrel of hydrofluoric acid, with his family never having any closure to what really happened to Mike. So yeah, this is a pretty tragic story in my opinion for Mike, to say the least. That was made even darker by the backstory of Better Call Saul compared to what we saw in the plot of Breaking Bad. And like I said, despite whatever happens to Mike next season in the plot of Better Call Saul, which I will likely assume will heavily incorporate him fully becoming the button man he was in the plot of Breaking Bad, who killed many men at the hands of Gus Fring, despite all of that, it still appears that the storyline of Mike Ehrmantraut appears to have been nothing but sound and fury for Mike, who was unable to provide for his family and give his family the financial security he hoped to.
I'm sorry, Mike. This whole thing could have been avoided. Shut the up. Let me die in peace.
Alright, that's all I really have for you guys for this one. As always, my name is Anton Jackson. Thank you so much for watching this video.